Welcome to the Boswell Book Company Urban Ecology Center virtual event. It is day 4,408 of Boswell being in business. And while I have mentioned upcoming events, they all pale in comparison to tonight's event. And because we want to make sure we highlight one of our favorite partners at the Urban Ecology Center, I give the mic over to Tim Vargo, who will say those words.
Well, thank you all thank you all for joining us today. And it's always great to work with Boswell. And I'll give you one tip. I think a lot of us, when we search for books online, I think it's very easy to go straight to Amazon. But it's a habit I made years ago that whenever I share a link to a book or search on book, I'm always searching Boswell's first. And it's just great to support the local bookstores, and it's just been a delight to work with them over the years, for many years in person and over the past year and a half virtually. The Urban Ecology Center has a mission of connecting people in cities to nature and to each other. And it's something we've been doing for a long time. And in the last year and a half, we've kind of scaled back on the connecting people to each other, at least in person, for a while, but we've still maintained a presence online, and we're slowly working our way back to getting people back in the nature, at least through Urban Ecology Center events. So Davita just coordinated a wonderful week-long series of events based on Earth Week. And on May 4th to May 7th, we have the Brew City Birding Festival. So that'll be a few in-person and live events based on birds, celebrating birds in cities, culminating with the Backyard Birding Blitz. So I do encourage you to check the Urban Ecology Center website as often as you check the Boswell Bookstore website. And thank you again for joining us. We're really, really excited to do this event with you. So I'll hand it back to you, Daniel.
Thank you. We are so excited to be presenting Jess Phoenix, the author of Misadventure, My Wild Explorations in Science, Lava, and Life. The book's won praise from numerous publications, including Publishers Weekly and Mountain Times. And from Patton Oswalt, Jess Phoenix's work encompasses science and representation in such a delightful melding that could only come from as spry and playful a soul as hers. Open this book, jump into the volcano. Jess Phoenix is, to quote, the executive director and co-founder of Blueprint Earth. Phoenix is a fellow in the Explorers Club and the Royal Geographical Society, a featured scientist on the Discovery and Science channels, and her writing has appeared in BBC Online, Daily Cause, and Face the Current magazine. We are excited today that Davita Flowers-Shanklin will be our conversation partner. She's the volunteer manager for the Urban Ecology Center and very important in all festivities, including those celebrating the Earth in Earth Week. Thank you so much for both of you. We are excited to have you, and I give you a virtual handshake, clap.
Awesome. Welcome, everybody. So Jess, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. I just actually finished your book on Sunday, so I'm so excited to ask you all sorts of questions. But first, I just wanted to ask, tell us how you got into geology. Why geology?
It was kind of an accident, actually. I was going to school to become an English professor. That was the goal when I got to college. And I ended up not liking the English department where I was in school. And so I switched majors a few times and almost failed out of college, honestly. And now I know that it was depression, but back in the early 2000s, it wasn't as well understood. And so I actually was taking a semester at UMass Amherst, and my school, Smith College, they had said, we're giving you a retroactive medical withdrawal so you don't utterly fail out, but you can't come back to Smith until you get better grades somewhere else. So I took these classes at UMass Amherst that were basically just designed to get me out of bed and go to the classes. And I took things that sounded fun, like that just I had an interest in, but had never taken the time to pause and really look at. And one of those classes, I mean, I had poetry, literature of travel and place, Native American peoples of North America, and then geology, intro geology. And like, it was the most boring class of all time. So there are certain instances, I always say, take the teacher, not the class. But in this instance, the class itself was so interesting that it didn't matter that the teacher lectured for 4 hours straight on Wednesday evenings from 6 p.m. to 10 in essentially a basement with no natural light, and faced the board away from us and wrote on an overhead projector for 4 solid hours. And I didn't care, because he was talking about how volcanoes work, why oceans are where they are, how mountains form and then are destroyed. And this was stuff that, I mean, this answers the not just big picture questions, but literally entire Earth questions. So I fell in love with it. And then I took as many geology classes as I could before I graduated. I didn't have time to change my major, but I did have time to go on a research expedition to Death Valley, California. And that sort of, it lodged itself in the back of my mind. And I thought, well, if this history degree I'm going to graduate with doesn't, you know, enthrall me long term, maybe I'll go back and get a geology degree. And that's what happened.
That's so cool. That's so awesome. So I wanted to mention, I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but if you have any questions for Jess, you can put them in the question and answer section or in the chat. I'll be monitoring that. And you can chat them now, or you can wait until the end, but we're going to have a conversation. And if your question is awesome, I'll definitely give it to Jess. So Jess, you have some reading for us, huh? You're going to read part of your book?
I can do that. So
Yeah.
the book, and I have it, it looks weird because I have this blurry background. Those of you with dogs will notice there's little weird shapes that are blurred out. It's my dogs. I have to keep 2 of them in the room with me, or barking happens. So apologies. But all you need to know for this little excerpt I'm going to read, this is from the 4th chapter of the book called Kilauea. And this is where I'm out with one other geologist. This is my first time working around active lava flows. And I have just seen a river of lava flowing through a lava tube. There was a little skylight into it. And so Matt and I were there by ourselves. We're miles from actual, you know, inhabited areas. And we're pretty remote. We've hiked in through the jungle, and now we're on the lava flow fields. And I have just seen flowing lava for the first time from about 50 feet away, because, you know, I can't go down inside the lava tube, but we had to go find other lava. So that's what you need to know. And this is like less than 5 minutes, because I don't want anyone falling asleep. Okay. I know how weird it is to have people reading at you via Zoom, but okay. Matt gave me a few minutes to marvel at this deadliest of rivers before redirecting us to our task of locating an active flow. Another half mile or so of carefully hiking across the flow field, avoiding the dicey newest flows and checking the handheld GPS units with the most recent flow maps, brought us to the edge of an oozing silver puddle that reminded me of a thicker version of the T-1000 Terminator in its liquid form. I gawked at the active Pahoehoe lava flow, and Matt smiled. He seemed to appreciate my newcomer's enthusiasm. What I saw was something that my limited experience told me had no right to exist. Rock was solid. It was firm, if occasionally brittle. It was dependable. Houses, fortresses, tools, and weapons can be built from it. Rock was static. It changed only slowly, only with great effort or great force. Yet here I was, a few feet from silver rock that was clearly alive in a way that only science or wizardry could explain. While Matt dug the sampling supplies out of his pack, I thought about what it must have been like to grow up in Hawaii before modern science could explain volcanoes. Of course, a goddess would have been a logical explanation for ground that could give birth to itself, sometimes destroying lives in the process. What other than something divine could make the solid earth turn to liquid fire? Nudging me out of my reverie, Matt handed me a full-face balaclava and silver gloves that were made for someone with much larger hands than mine. I donned the balaclava with care, leaving my sunglasses in place. Then I pulled on the gloves and assessed the heat-resistant silver. It matched the lava oozing in the background. Matt passed me a metal coffee can filled halfway with water and a rock hammer that I would use to pull off some of the molten rock. I approached the flow guardedly. My goal was to get close enough to stick the pointed pick end of the hammer into one of the flow's toes. As I drew closer, the heat grew more intense than anything I'd ever felt. The flow I was targeting was in excess of 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, which is nearly 4 times hotter than the highest setting on an oven. It seemed as if nature had hushed itself unbidden, except for my heartbeat, which was jackhammering in my ears. I paused, eyeballing potential targets and not wanting to get closer to that outrageous heat until I knew for certain where I would strike. I set the coffee can down behind me and decided on a nice fat lobe of lava about 6 feet away that was slowly blobbing toward my right foot. Faintly, I heard a tinkle that sounded like tiny pieces of glass being crunched ever so gently. The lava was making an almost musical sound as the new flow rolled over the older ground beneath. Between that and the radiating waves of heat that were hitting me full force, it felt like a dream. I couldn't take the heat much longer, so I clenched my teeth and stepped toward the flow, right arm extended with the hammer pick pointing down. Suddenly, my eyes felt like they were being sandblasted. At Matt's direction, I had kept my sunglasses on, so I tried blinking. The awful feeling remained, and I recognized my eyes were dehydrating. I needed to hurry, or my vision might end up more compromised than it already was, and one errant movement could result in serious burns. I took one last step, shielded my eyes with my gloved left hand enough to deflect some of the searing air, planted my right foot 10 inches from the flow, and stuck the pick into the living silvery glob. Feeling no resistance, I pulled up slowly, straining against the heat to see what was happening on the end of the hammer. The lava followed the hammer's path, some of its sticky bulk attached to the pick, with the rest fighting to stay part of the flow. The taffy from hell stretched vivid and red, the insubstantial silver crust broken by the hammer, the flow's dazzling scarlet insides exposed to the world. I kept pulling and freed a glob, the molten rock tendrils oozing back to the bulk of the flow. I pivoted, shaking the hammer to make the glob release its hold. It fell into the waiting coffee can, and the water inside crackled to life, boiling instantly thanks to the scorching lava bleb I had dropped. Steam rose from the can as the sample was hyper-quenched, solidifying it and preserving the information contained inside its primordial makeup. As soon as the boiling stopped, I picked up the can and rejoined Matt at a safe distance from the flow front. Relieved to be in cooler air and ecstatic about all things lava, I couldn't stop grinning. We packed up the sample and trekked off to map the lava flow that was currently burning an isolated island of green amid this sea of black. There we go.
That's awesome. I just can't imagine sticking a hammer in the lava and at the same time definitely want to touch it. I mean, I know you can't, but did you have that feeling?
Oh yeah, you totally want to like stick your finger in it. I mean, because it's obviously, I mean, it's a solid, but like the definition per physics is it's a plastic solid, meaning that it's a solid object or solid substance and it's flowing like a liquid. And I mean, that happens typically like deep underground. That's when you get, solids flowing like the Earth's mantle. So the only chance that we up here on the surface with a regular amount of pressure get to feel this is or get to see it in process is with something like lava. And oh my God, it is so beautiful. It really is like something alive. And that is, I try to make the point a lot in the book. And then when I give talks about this stuff or when I'm on TV, that volcanoes are really appealing to me. And I think to a lot of people, if they stop to think about why, it's because they're a geologic process that, unlike say an earthquake or a tsunami, those are really destructive things. And volcanoes both create and destroy. And that duality is something I think that resonates with us as a human species. Like we love things that have two sides to the coin, and that is what volcanoes do. I mean, they obliterate entire lives, cultures, towns. I mean, that's what they do. But at the same time, lava creates really fertile ground for farming. And I mean, it literally creates new borders for the island of Hawaii. So it's both growth and destruction. And I love that it's all a cycle.
That's so cool. So I have a bunch of questions for you.
Okay,
good. As I was going through the book. So one of the things that I noticed is that every chapter probably could have been its own book, right? Like your adventures, like through time, through your discovery of your passion and your learning and all the different adventures you go on, could have been their own standalone book. How did you choose what to write about?
It was tricky because I know that oh my God, there's so much stuff that didn't go into the book. And even just like within the different chapters, like the chapter on Peru. I mean, I talk about the beginning of the expedition, which small spoiler, it won't ruin it if you do buy the book and you haven't read it yet. I do fall in a sewer. It's nasty. But then I have to go on and do the expedition. And I didn't even put in the part like, oh, we encountered, guinea pig farmers right in the shadow of Machu Picchu. And it's like, that stuff didn't even make it because it's like, oh, I have to talk about, the science and why we're there. But there are so many factors that go into doing field research, especially in remote places, that, I mean, it really could be each little incident in here, each story there was so much more to it. And I just tried to say, okay, what makes like an episode? Like what can people wrap their minds around as a thing? And I said, well, with Hawaii, how do I structure it? I was there for 4 months, 3 months on land and then a month at sea. And I thought, well, okay, I could order this by the volcanoes. And the best tip, and if anybody here is contemplating writing a book, I had an author friend tell me, oh, you should go maybe get your MFA while you're writing the book because you'll get more eyes on it and, you can earn a degree while you're also writing. And I was like, great, sounds good. That's a little masochistic, but the first mentor I had in that MFA program said, because I had no idea how to structure or organize all this. And I said, but how do I even write about this? And she said, just make a timeline. It's your life. It's a memoir. Start with a timeline and put the year that you think the episode, covers. And then you can make it specific to your life. You can put, oh, was I getting married? Did I just get a divorce? Did I have a kid? Whatever. Put a life event that matches that timeline and then put a world event. And so it's like, oh, 2004, the war in Afghanistan, that was new when this was happening. And so it really contextualizes things. So if anyone here is trying to work on any sort of memoir or writing, make a timeline. It's so helpful. And even if you're writing fiction, make a timeline for your characters because our minds love to work in a linear fashion. So it really helps organizing. And that's really the structure of the book. It was me saying, all right, here are events. Now, how do I string them together? All right, we'll flash back, but how far back? And then we'll go forward, how far forward? And, you just have to give people that little information. It's this year, it's this place. And then you can go wherever you want with it.
Yeah, it was really well done. I felt like I was growing with you as you were learning and experiencing things. And like, I really liked how when you talked about your first camping experience ever and the exciting adventure of having to figure out how to go to the bathroom in the desert, having never camped before, to just like, starting like your political career. Just like it's such a growth book, and I think it's really inspiring. We do have a question in the chat, so I'm just gonna like stick that in. Okay. So this is from Chris Young, and the question says, are you an avid traveler first and got into the science as a result, or did you start doing this science and become a traveler?
I always wanted to travel. That's a really good question. I grew up fairly US centric. My parents were federal government employees. So all of our stuff was like, oh, we can take a road trip, but we can't really leave because we may have something important come up. So I had only been abroad, I think once before I went to college. And then I was like, ooh, Canada. I went to England with my family for like 2 weeks once. But other than that, I mean, I was well-traveled within the US, which is great because the US is huge and has such a diversity of landscapes. But when I went to Canada, I went to Mexico, then I was like, I want to go everywhere. And geology is, when I heard about it as a like an actual profession, I was already almost done with college. And I thought, wait, there's a job where you get paid to travel the world? What? And, you know, and it was a science job too, which I always thought were just cool by the very nature of science. Like you're searching for something that we can, you know, understand about the world around us by eliminating uncertainty. I love that there was a method, there's a process. And it was like, oh, and by the way, if you do volcanoes, they are in Antarctica and in tropical locations and Europe and Japan and Africa. I mean, they're everywhere. So it really was like being a geologist opened the door to the world to me. But then I know plenty of geologists who, like, there are jobs where you can work for the state of Utah and be a geologist for them. And we have environmental geology too. So if you're more of a homebody, it has an appeal as well. It's really up to the geologist to kind of pick what they're good at and go that direction. But yeah, I always wanted to see everything. And this job really gives me an excuse to do that. So it worked out well.
So the book starts off with you joining a very special club. And so I wanted to know, like, why the Explorers Club? Why, excuse me, why would you want to do that? How was the process for you?
Well, I thought it was fake. I thought the Explorers Club was like, I thought all the exploration had been done, which I think is a really common attitude. People just believe that, okay, the only thing left to explore is space. Like, oh, we've been to the moon, but we still need to go to Mars, but then who knows? And that's sort of what people seem to think as a general consensus. I know when I taught university at Cal State LA, a lot of the students were like, but we already know everything about Earth. And I'm like, are you kidding? And so I thought the Explorers Club was like, you had to have summited some mountain for the first time or made contact with a tribe that had never, you know, been in contact with the outside world at this point. And of course, a very colonial view of exploration, which is how it used to be. It was all colonialism for a long time. And of course, capitalism. That was a big part of it too. However, the Explorers Club, it was founded in 1904. So it did have a kind of a colonial origin story. But when I looked into it, I was like, wait, this is a club you can still belong to. And I started to do some research into it, like who's in the club, what are the requirements to be in it. And now it has evolved through the pushing of some pretty cool people like Carl Sagan and Jane Goodall, Sally Ride. It became a club that admitted women and is now working pretty hard to diversify from its original base. And it's changed the focus. It's no longer old white guys trophy hunting club, which is sort of how it started. Now, nothing against old white guys is a general thing, but they definitely did more than their fair share of trophy hunting. But now it is a club that is encouraging exploration in the name of science. So we're talking scientists as explorers. And I thought, wait, I'm a scientist. And I've done research on, you know, glaciers connected to climate change, on volcanic eruptions and hazards, you know, even dating ancient lake shores in the valley next to Death Valley. So I'm like, wait, maybe I qualify, maybe. And I got an introduction to one of the things in the book that I make note of is the club still has a lot of people with names that are like super explorer-y. Like the guy who was one of my sponsors for joining the club is named Bill Steele. And I was like, really? His name's Bill Steele? Sounds like somebody from a novel. And then my other co-sponsor was Jim Smith. And again, I'm like, all right. And of course, the other day in our explorers group chat online, Bill Steele talked about Robert Stone, another explorer. And I'm like, he better be a geologist. But it's nowadays, the club really, they have a student membership component, and I'm pretty involved in trying to get diverse groups of young people interested. I mean, the explorers of the future look like every single person. Like there's no right way to be an explorer except to respect the places and the people where you're doing your work. And so that's really what the club has shifted towards. And they really are about promoting field research, which it's kind of under fire because a lot of it is pricey. I mean, obviously being in a lab or using a satellite, once you get the satellite up, it's cheaper and safer in a lot of cases than sending humans out to put boots on the ground. but we still do need that. So the club is about promoting that and trying to understand the world around us. And I couldn't believe they let me in, but they did. And they haven't kicked me out yet. So fingers crossed. But it is a really cool place because you can be sitting at the bar in club headquarters in New York, and you'll overhear someone say, oh, well, when I was working on blah, blah, blah volcano, and you turn to them and you go, oh, you work on volcanoes? So do I. And they go, oh, that's great. And then you start talking about volcanoes, which that does not happen usually at the local coffee shop.
So, okay, so adventure and exploration, clearly that is a theme in your book. But also I noticed that with the exploration and adventure, there's also danger and even death. So can you talk a little bit about, like, you know, you work on volcanoes, that's super dangerous. When you were on the ship in Hawaii, there was one of your colleagues died. You know, that's a really big deal, and you're a field scientist. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think most people really do think scientists are lab bound. You know, we have our pocket protectors and our glasses and our lab coats. And that is part of it. I mean, everybody has to spend time in the lab if you're doing science, but when you do work in these remote areas, and even if you're not working on something like, let's say, inherently dangerous, like let's say you study a certain kind of plankton in the middle, you know, and in the Atlantic Ocean, you got to get to the plankton. So, you know, anything can happen when you are out and about. I mean, we all know how dangerous just car rides to the store are. Now think about, you know, taking a car ride on the side of an active volcano. Like, okay. And so my job is a lot of calculated risk. And fundamentally, like, to get serious for a moment, I have to do this work, and all scientists working in natural hazards, we do what we do because we want to keep the public safe. And it's because, you know, we're not going to stop a volcano. If we decide to build our city right next to it, the volcano is going to do what the volcano does. And it's up to us to adapt and to be prepared and to be able to warn each other when we see signs that things are going to go sideways. And so every time I go out and I work on any of these hazardous things, I always am doing my own risk calculation in my head. Like, is the value of what I'm going to bring back, is that going to be worth it? Is it going to inform us, educate us? And of course, for some of the stuff, some of the TV work I've done, is it going to be entertaining, but also give us new information about an actual question we have? I don't do stuff just for thrills. In fact, everybody I know is like, oh, you should go skydiving. And I'm like, no, I will not go skydiving. But if it's for science, if you can give me a valid scientific reason why I need to go skydiving to, like, save some village from fiery destruction or something, I will jump out of the plane. But again, it's all a personal risk calculation. And it's not always the volcano. I mean, a lot of the stuff in the book, I think I tried to highlight that the dangers, a lot of the unpredictability comes from the other people, especially in remote areas. I mean, some of the dangers, because they see me and they see the way I look and they think, oh, there's an easy target. And I'm like, like, I carry a rock hammer. But it's also that you do have to know your limits, and you have to know, again, what your risk tolerance is, because everybody has a different limit. And, you know, I know some scientists who won't go in helicopters because technically they're kind of a physics nightmare. It's just controlled falling more so than flight. And I love helicopters. I hate planes. So, you know, it doesn't mean I have to be rational, but you know, we can all have our own our risk tolerance. And that's, you know, that's important. We all do it every day. We calculate, you know, is a risk in love acceptable, or with a job? And we just do it with forces of nature.
So you mentioned that you've been on television quite a bit. And I know that in your book, you mention your first trip with Discovery Channel and some of the staged risks that they had you go through. And also, I want to, like, so there's that part of it, you know, like making sure that you are giving a true example of what science really is, and that you would never do those types of things because you're smarter than that. And also, I know that you mentioned a bit about, like, the types of clothes that they wanted you to wear because of who you are. So there's, like, the sexism of it, and then there's the safety. And I just thought that that was just a really beautiful example of you, like, standing up for yourself, and then also trying to make good TV. And I just want to hear your actual words instead of just reading them about what that was like.
It's tough. It is like, think about it this way. Like, you get this opportunity to go on international TV and talk about the thing that you just think is the coolest thing on earth. And the way they got me and some other legitimate scientists to agree to this particular show, it's called Trailblazers. You can still find it on Amazon. It is terrible. I'm warning you right now. If you see any sort of edits in there, little clips where my face is like this and they have words going, I didn't say that in that context. I learned that from this show, that if you can't see somebody's mouth moving, don't trust that they said those words at that moment. Because the folks who were in charge of that particular show, what I heard was that the guy, the executive producer, had gotten his start on American Idol, which is a far cry from field science. So I was basically I didn't even know it, but I was pushing a boulder uphill, trying to educate the producers and everybody, like, no, real scientists actually do know how to camp. We do know how to hike. Because they had brought a military guy. He was fantastic. I mean, he was a former Navy SEAL. He was wonderful as a human, but they said, oh, he's going to protect you. And I'm like, what? Like, we do this as our job. We don't need anybody here to protect us. So, and then of course they did say, it was like the day before I left or something like that to go to Ecuador. I get a call and it's like, or no, it was an email and it was, oh, can you bring leggings? And I'm like, leggings? What for? Like, I wear track pants around camp and I wear, cargo pants when I'm working on volcanoes. And they were like, yes, but we really would like it if you'd wear leggings. And I'm like, no, I got so mad. And I had a pair of leggings that they had actually got because of the wardrobe, they took care of that. And I brought them and I was just livid. I mean, I got on the plane, I was mad. I got down to Ecuador, I was mad. But then when I met my two on-camera buddies, there was Jeff Johnson, who is he's a volcano geophysicist up at Boise State in Idaho. And then Sean, the Navy SEAL. I told them how mad I was when I got down there. I actually explained it to them and they said, oh, well, Jeff goes, I do Ironman, so I actually have running tights and I have two pairs. So if they make you wear leggings, Sean and I will wear leggings. And I said, you guys are awesome. And so that's what it is. I mean, it's nice to stand up for yourself, but it's really great when you can get other people to help. It takes the pressure off. And it also educated me. It made me understand what TV needs to look good and to, keep us as a captive audience in the age of everything being shiny and clicky and flashy and, our attention spans being 20 seconds long. So I can now see things both from a director's point of view and, an audience point of view and from a science point of view. So I know my chapter on Discovery had a bit of critique, but since then I've done a lot of TV with Science Channel and Travel Channel, even Weather Channel. And now I've done another series with Discovery where I'm so excited. Like, for years, they told me you can't host a show because no one will believe that you're a scientist because you're too young and you're female. And I cannot tell you how annoying it was to hear that. And they finally said, oh, we want you to co-host this show. It's not volcanoes, unfortunately. Write to them and tell them you want a volcano show, but it's about Atlantis. And so I get to be the scientist and I test the hypothesis that my friend Stell, who's a historian, I test his hypothesis, putting Atlantis at a different time than what was previously thought. And so we get to travel all around Europe. And I actually got to say, here's a catastrophe in this part of the world that could have taken out an Atlantean level civilization in one day. So I was responsible for actually going, this could have done it. And then we actually get to go investigate it and test the hypothesis. So progress can be made, but it is tricky. And I do encourage, if anybody is, from academia listening to this, if you can encourage media training for scientists, that actually would make the biggest change in how I think science is perceived by the public. If all scientists had at least a basic education in how to explain why what they do matters, we would have a much more scientifically literate public. And oh my God, it'd be great.
So the Urban Ecology Center is an environmental community center in the city, and we really want people to be connected to nature, but we're also showing young people that this is science. You can do science in your backyard. You can do science here in your park. And there's so many different people teaching science. I know that with your work with Blueprint Earth, that you're trying to diversify the scientific field and give people opportunities to do their field research. Can you talk about the importance of the diversity and the young people that you work with in your nonprofit?
Well, it was something that really opened my eyes to obviously a lot of my own privilege, coming from a middle-class background and getting to go to a really good private school. Like, I was like sitting on all that going like, well, I've never camped before, but I'm sure a lot of other people have. My problems were tiny in learning how to do field science compared to what some of my students at Cal State Los Angeles had to deal with. I mean, I taught intro oceanography and intro to geology there. And oceanography, the cool thing about sciences like geology is that you get field trips as an adult, and it's awesome, again, with the travel. And so we actually had field trips out on a boat for the oceanography class. And we would go out between LA and Catalina Island, which is just offshore. And we would trawl for, marine bio. We'd pull up an octopus, never get to see it. And then you pull it back down, and fish and starfish. And it's cool. And we would also talk about, waves and how they're formed and how the landscape has evolved. It's great. But I was telling the students, these are intro students, so they've never taken any classes like this. And I would say, okay, don't eat Denny's the night before we go on the boat. Like, if you think you might get seasick, get some Dramamine. I would give them all the tips. And one time I had a student come up to me afterwards and he goes, I'm a little nervous. And I said, okay, that's normal. Like, you're going on a boat. Have you ever been on a boat? No, but I've also never been to the ocean. And I don't know how many people listening are familiar with LA, but Cal State Los Angeles is 12 miles from the ocean. It's not that far, but Cal State LA is primarily to use the federal term, I don't like this term, but it's what the government designates it as. It's a minority serving institution. And so most of the students there, I mean, by far and away, they're people of color. A lot of them are first generation college students, and a lot came from low income or English language learner backgrounds, all those things in different combos. So this guy, I said to him, like, you've never been to the ocean? Sort of like, whoa. And he said, yeah, I've been working at my parents' Mexican restaurant since I was 6. I work there every day, and I've never had time to go to the ocean. And I went, oh my God, right. So it really spun my world around, and I went, okay, how can I make science not just something that's great and cool for those who can afford to pay thousands of dollars to go on field research camp, which is actually what you need to do. You need to spend 6 weeks and go out, and every university that has a geology degree program typically does a field course as part of that. And if you want to go on a volcanology field course in Alaska, it's like $7,000 for 7 to 10 days. And I said, I couldn't even drop that money. So we created Blueprint Earth. We're trying to create actual functional ecosystem blueprints to basically say, if an environment is damaged, we know the components, everything from microbes to clouds and everything between. We know everything that we need to put it back together and make sure it functions. So we said, okay, let's do that, but let's get teams of students and make it available to the students at no cost. And if they need tents, if they need backpacks, or, sleeping bags, like, we can provide those things. So we have a stash of loaner gear, and we're able to get students out. And we've had a student from the Philippines, which was a little bit like, whoa, but, and then we've had a couple of international folks like Canada, but we've had students from super urban areas all around the US. And we've had students from local community colleges here in LA who had never been camping, with like Eagle Scouts from Brown University who had come out. And the best part is they're working side by side with each other across, biology and geology and atmospheric research, and with senior scientists who supervise them. So they get to see how all these different sciences work and how they're connected and how it makes environments function. Plus, we tell them how to go to the bathroom outside if they've never done it before, because trust me, that is a huge hang up for people. So, you just got to make this stuff not scary and take away any stigma about not knowing, because I mean, science is for everyone. Nature's for everyone. Like, it's what you all do at the Urban Ecology Center is so important. And I just wish that if there's anything I could give the whole world, it would be to take everybody to see a volcano erupting safely, because it really changes your whole perspective. And different people, it's birds or it's deer or, you know, plant life. I don't care what your thing is, find your thing and you know, tell people that you love that thing.
Yeah, I wrote down when I was reading your book, one of your quotes from page 24, if you're following along at home, where you say, how can you learn to see the forest for the trees if you cannot afford the price of admission to the wilderness? And I think that that is just so powerful and really speaks to what we do at the Urban Ecology Center. So thank you for at least like mentioning that, even if, you know, that wasn't the whole focus of your book, but I think it's really important for people to have that kind of question in their mind and to think about who has access to nature and who has access to wilderness and science.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a program that's, I believe it's still going on, that the national parks run, where fourth graders and their family, every for the year that they're in fourth grade, they get free parks access. So all the national parks. So if you have a fourth grader in your life, they can get their pass, and the whole family gets to go in the national park for free. So basically, if you can get to the park, so that's a really good program. So if y'all can spread the word, that would be fantastic, because we need more people appreciating. I mean, we all share the earth as our home. Like, it doesn't belong to anybody. So it's up to us to remember that and to open doors for people to experience it, because it is glorious out there.
So we have a question in the chat. So this question is, an explorer's lifestyle has a lot of appeal, but I also imagine that there are sacrifices. What were the hardest changes to your lifestyle to make, that you had to make?
Well, for me, I mean, I love traveling, but I actually hate leaving my animals at home. I have a lot of rescue animals because a pit stop in my career journey was actually being a veterinary technician for small animals, and I rescue and retrain ex-racehorses. I take them out of the slaughter pipeline and find them new jobs. And so I have right now, I think 11 pets, 11 or 12. I can't remember. I'd have to count them. But whenever I leave, it's really tough. And I have a supportive spouse, thank goodness. Carlos is wonderful. And he takes care of, we call them the little guys, but he takes care of the little guys when I'm gone. But if we're both traveling, it gets tough. And so we don't actually travel a lot for fun, he and I. Most of our traveling is done via Blueprint Earth, like, let's go to the Mojave again. And he doesn't get to come with me on to all these cool, amazing places. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, so I went to Tanzania and Iceland and Indonesia, and Carlos wasn't there. But he did have his own travels that happened before we met. So he lived abroad all over Europe and South America. So we basically say, like, we both are good at traveling, but we rarely get to do it together. And so it's just, you know, not a lot of vacation travel, but that's fine, because I see this stuff and then I feel obligated to come back and tell everybody about it. So that's why there's a book, and why there will probably be another book, at least one more, because this stuff is too great to keep to yourself. But you do make sacrifices. You do miss birthdays. I was gone for Carlos's birthday, even during the pandemic last year, and it was his 40th. And I felt like a horrible person, but he assured me that I'm not. So, but you know, I figure I'm just lucky. I'm really, really fortunate. And so I got to take the opportunities if they come up.
So we have 15 minutes left. I thought this might be a good time for us to see some pictures, because I know that while I was reading the book, there'd be times when you would like super detailed explain how you took a picture, or the camera you had and the photos that you took. And I was just like, I need to see them. So, I mean, I did see some of them because I went on the internet and found everything you've ever posted, but I think it would be really interesting for all of us to see some of these really cool photos you have.
Sure. So this is from the book. I only grabbed some pictures that were from the book. So if you follow me online, some of this, like the Atlantis show stuff, I didn't put any of these in this whole slideshow, but this is me inside of a vent on the summit of Mauna Loa volcano. This was my first time ever on a volcano, and I got to crawl down in this vent. And to give you an idea of what's going on, Mauna Loa is almost 14,000 feet above sea level, the summit. And it goes down, you know, the bulk of it from the bottom of the seafloor to the summit is bigger than Mount Everest. And the lava that I'm standing amidst there, I mean, that is a hole beneath me, and that's the vent that goes down, the conduit where the lava came out. But that is from 1984, and I was born in 82. So I was like, I am older than this earth that I am crawling around in, which is a little mind-blowing. And oop, there we go. This is to give you some scale. So that is me also in the same vent, and you can see how vast Mauna Loa's summit caldera is. You can't see all the way across it. It's literal miles across. And this is, you know, this is an area that basically is a fiery hellscape when the volcano erupts at the summit. And when I sent this picture, I'm looking at the mineralogy there in the wall of the vent. And I sent these to my mom the first night, and she was like, "Where is there a safety harness?" And I was like, "Well, the other scientists said it was okay." So yeah, if you were wondering how my parents took that, they have minor heart attacks. So I don't tell them until after the fact what I do. So then this was also from one of the parts of the book. These are, on the right is Frank Truesdale. He was one of my main mentor at the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory. And he had quite an outfit on. Frank always dresses super fashionably, as all geologists do. And that device on the left with David, who is another volunteer researcher, that is a kinematic GPS. So it basically is used for taking a survey at predetermined points as you go over a set course. So we were measuring an area called the Ainapo Trail, and the weather moved in, and it was cold, and then it would rain, and it was fairly miserable. And I was carrying like 75 pounds of gear in my bag. And at the time, I think I weighed like 130. So it was more than half my body weight. It was quite, and you go down this hill, and for a long time, there's no vegetation. You've got about 5,000 feet that you go down and until you hit the tree line. So it's intense. And that night, because the weather got so crazy, we had to sleep in a lava tube, which you never want to do in Hawaii, because they were the areas where the Hawaiians would bury their dead, the native Hawaiians. Frank is part native Hawaiian. And when it was raining so hard, Frank was like, "Get in the tube." And David and I were like, "But we can't, like, those are burial ground." And he goes, "This one's fine. I checked with my ancestors, get in." But he was just like, "I don't want to set up a tent in this. Like, let's just go in the tube." So we slept in a lava tube, and I thought I was going to get, you know, murdered by the ghosts of the offended Hawaiians, but I did not, thankfully. Spoiler, I'm fine. But it just shows you like the weird places you end up when you do this stuff. And this was me in a kapuka, which is the forested area that is, you could basically get lava going around it, and it leaves a tiny little forest that's isolated by the lava. And in this case, the kapuka started to have a river of lava going right through it. And being the really high quality scientist I am, I said,
Of course.
I'm going to poke it with a stick. And my friends and I had jokes about poking things with sticks. So there I am poking a river of lava with a stick, and predictably the stick caught on fire. So in case you were wondering what happens when you poke it, that's what happens. And then this is from the little bit I just read you all. This is me for the very first time sampling flowing lava. And you can see it really does look like a taffy. It's a little blurry. I mean, this is 2008. Cell phones were not the greatest back then. But you get the idea how silvery the pahoehoe is. That's the type of lava that's ropey and very oozy and runny. And you can see how it's fractured into very small pieces by the edges of the flow. Those are very glassy. There's a lot of silica in lava. Silica is the most abundant mineral, well, element on the planet. And then you can actually like get a sense that that's the crunching, as the plastic solid of the lava moves over the older, colder stuff, it makes this glassy noise. And it's really a full body experience, because I'm shielding my face from the radiant heat, because it is 2000 degrees, more or less 1800, 2000, it's hot. And I'm wearing all cotton, because you do not wear synthetics next to a lava flow. And my work boots do not have steel toes, because you don't want to cook your toes. And I couldn't see what I was doing at that point. I just had to stab blindly with the hammer and just, okay, I think I got it. So that is what it looks like. And of course, everybody who works on volcanoes with helicopters takes a hero shot, and they made me pose for this, but I honestly had no problem doing it because I love helicopters. And this is on the side of Mauna Loa, the world's largest volcano, yet again. And that guy is the best pilot in Hawaii. He's amazing. His name's David. He's just the best. I would trust him to fly anywhere. And then, of course, I was waiting for the helicopter in my flight suit at one point, and I said, "Ooh, lava angel." And I do not advise making a lava angel, even when the lava is cooled. It is very stabby. Remember, I mentioned it has a lot of silica. Not comfortable, but I've done it, so you don't have to. And this is from the research cruise that I went on. We're on the deck of the RV Thomas G. Thompson. And on the left-hand side over there, this is like 2 a.m, and the submersible has just come back up onto deck. And that is my boss there, Mark Kurz, who's a scientist at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. And I am the tannest I've ever been in my life because I've just spent 3 months on land in Hawaii. I am not that tan normally. I am pale as can be. But we're pulling out a big lava sample that we're going to use in the lab. And then on the right, I'm using the glove box, which everybody thinks looks like Homer Simpson at work in the intro to The Simpsons. But there's a nitrogen atmosphere in there, and I'm cleaning little olivine crystals. I'm basically blowing nitrogen on them to separate them from the rock. And then we can use geochemistry techniques to tell us more about what the Earth was like when that rock solidified. So cool stuff. And then this was, like I said, I didn't get Peru pictures. Sorry for those following along. I have some, but I just didn't dig them up in time. So there's no Peru pictures. You just have to guess. But this is Ecuador. This was filming for Discovery. And I'm on the left, and you can see Sean, the Navy SEAL, is in the middle with the beard. And then on the right is Jeff Johnson, the volcano geophysicist. In the back, El Reventador is erupting, as it did every 30 minutes. And on the far right, you get the cameraman who was just, what's awesome is that his facial expression proves to me that what I do is just the most fun thing ever. Because these camera guys, the crew that we had was Bear Grylls' camera crew, and they've seen a lot. They've seen the guy drink his own urine. So, for them to be amazed every time the volcano erupted, that just solidifies to me that people who have access to the most amazing visuals on planet Earth cannot help but be awed when you actually feel a volcanic eruption, like you feel it rattle your rib cage. It's just so, truly awesome in the real sense of the word. And then Explorers Club flag, there's Carlos on the right, since he's he's my enabler for all this and supporter. And that was us leading a flag expedition for the Explorers Club into our research area in California's Mojave Desert. And more Explorers Club on the left. That is what I looked like while I was running for Congress, yet at an Explorers Club dinner in New York. And the photographer there, he had just finished photographing NASA astronauts, who'd gone to the moon. So he'd taken pictures of Buzz Aldrin, and he's like, "Okay, Jess." So, it's pretty cool. And I have to say, that's how I clean up with my mohawk up. But on the right is the original mohawk. And that is the very end of the book. I pose with Fearless Girl, and that is the photo. So nothing fancy, nothing professional. It was Carlos with a camera phone, but that is, to me, I can't believe everything that has happened since. I went from almost failing out of college to running for Congress and traveling the world and hopefully getting people excited about science. So that was the end of the photos, but
that's awesome. I'm so glad you were able to find all the pictures that you had. That just made my whole night. So we have like 5 minutes left. If there's any other questions in the chat, otherwise I definitely have more, but you can put them in and we might be able to get to it. So let's see, oh my goodness, what should the last question be? I have so many. How about, what advice would you have to any like young person, or I guess anyone, but someone who's like from the city, never really thought about science or field science as an option? What advice would you give a young person who like just happens to see you on Discovery Channel, or, when they're thinking about what they could do with their life?
Well, tell people what you're interested in. And that is, there are people in life who will throw roadblocks in your way, and that's inevitable. It happens. Sometimes they mean to, sometimes they don't, but there are also people who will open doors. They will they will kick the doors down, that are in your way, and they will let you walk through and shine your light. So tell everybody, I'm not kidding. Like, I like volcanoes, and my email address, like, I have several, but like, they all have volcanoes in them. And I always get, customer service people, does that mean something? And I'm like, yeah, I study volcanoes. And they're like, oh my God, and they get so excited. So I don't care if you love like beetles, like the insect or the band, either way. Or if you're into, like, who knows, like, there's a guy I'm friends with online. He's a professor, and he loves these fish called gar. They're like a very primitive kind of fish. He tells everybody about gar. And that's the thing, is if you have something, even if you're just interested in it, you're like, I am fascinated with Venus. I want to go to Venus. I want to know about Venus. Tell everybody. If you're a kid, tell the adults in your life. If you're an adult, tell your friends, tell your colleagues. Like, you don't gain anything in life by keeping the things that you're curious about to yourself. Like, we're a social, curious species. Like, that's in our nature. And we all want to go and test the world around us to see if, our hypotheses about it hold true. So the only way that you can really get to know who's going to open doors for you is by telling people what you think you're into. And if you change your mind, that's fine too. I still love animals. Doesn't mean I had to become a veterinarian. I still am involved with them, but I did get the chance to work in vet medicine to see what it was like. I wouldn't have gotten that chance if I hadn't spoken up. Mm-hmm. So, if you are from an inner city area, look online. There's so many more resources, and we're so connected. And a great place to start is with a librarian. So if you can find a librarian, whether it's a school librarian or a public city library, go there and ask them to help you find resources. And librarians love to help find stuff, any kind of information. So bug your librarians, folks.
That's awesome. We did get one last question in the chat. And the question is, what are the tattoos on your arms? What did they
I get
say?
that. Okay, so I get that one a lot. Let's see here. See if we can show the whole things. So they are quotes by T.S. Eliot, who was the poet I was going to study. And they say, only through time, time is conquered. And on this side, we've got an hourglass that's mostly full, and this one, it's mostly empty. And so I'm not an English professor, but I love language. I love literature. And the concept of time is not just woven through T.S. Eliot's poetry. It's fundamental to geology. We as humans operate on, a lifespan of about 80 years if we're lucky. And the Earth is 4.54 billion years old, more or less. And so we're only here for a moment in time. And the only way we can understand more about our place in time is you got to go through. So that's the whole thing. And I love thinking about time when I like to feel small. And geology is also a good way to do that.
I look at trees when I want to feel small, and I just like marvel at their existence.
They're pretty great. Have you read Lab Girl by Hope
I have
Jaron?
not. No.
Oh my God, read Lab Girl if you love trees. Yes, she's a plant scientist, and the way she writes about trees, if you're a tree person, you will love it.
That's awesome. Well, it is 8 o'clock our time. I think that means it's 6 o'clock where you are. And so Daniel, back to you. Thanks so much, Jess. This was so much fun.
Sure. Thanks for everybody who's here. I'm glad so many tuned in.
I will second that you should read Lab Girl, by the way. And I would also like to thank both of you for a wonderful evening of conversation. Thank you so much. And thank you, as always, to the Urban Ecology Center. And thank you to everyone who attended. We wouldn't have an independent bookstore or a group of oases, of nature oases in Milwaukee without you. So don't forget to donate to the Urban Ecology Center. That's a good thing. Thank you again. Have a wonderful evening. May a volcano be in your future too.
And thanks to Davita, because this was wonderful. And thank you, Daniel, and thanks, Tim. And thanks for everybody who came. I hope I get to make it out to Milwaukee soon and see the Urban Ecology Center in person. I would love that.
Let us know. We'll host you.
Yay. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Bye.